This is the Little Moments Count radio podcast, created in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. Each episode, you'll hear interviews with early childhood experts on how to support the important brain development that takes place in the first 1,000 days of life, just through little moments every day. Learn more at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.
And welcome to the narrative on KRSM, where we highlight the voices, stories, cultures, and conversations that are happening in our neighborhood. I'm your host, Andrea Pierre, and today we have a special guest. It's our Little Moments Count segment. We are excited to partner with Little Moments Counts to host conversations focused on early childhood development. We will be welcoming new hosts and new subject matter experts each month to talk about their role in early childhood development and in creating bright futures and strong communities. Little Moments Counts is a statewide collaborative focused on helping parents and caregivers learn about the importance of brain development in the first 3 years of life. Nearly 80% of brain growth happens in the first 1,000 days, and small moments of interactions like talking and playing, reading and singing help create the pathways to build a child's brain during the first early stages of life. For more information about this, you can visit littlemomentscount.org. And our guest this month is Bethany Gilmer. Bethany Gilmer goes by she, her pronouns and is an early childhood teacher and parent educator. She has been teaching with Minneapolis Public Schools early childhood family education program for the past 11 years. She's passionate about supporting the grown-ups of our youngest learners, particularly in how to engage our young children in their conversations and learning about race. So, Bethany, welcome to the narrative here on KRSM. We're so excited to have you. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
What a great career, 11 years in ECFE. And, when I was, my children, I have 2 teenage girls. And, for ECFE, I tried to go a little bit and I liked it, but I think I found out really at the end when they were right about to enter kindergarten. And I kind of wish I had known about that resource earlier. What brought you to this work of being an early childhood educator?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I feel like I fell into it. It found me. I did my student teaching with Minneapolis Public Schools, and I hadn't heard about ECFE before either. And I loved it. It kind of makes sense, right? If we want to have an impact on our children, our greatest link to them is their most trusted grownups. It makes so much sense. And so I thought, wow, what a way to be able to encompass the family.
It's a great experience because also, as a new parent, you just don't know what to do, and information changes from generation to generation. The biggest one that I always talk about is do you sleep on your back? Do you sleep on your sides? When I was a baby, we had baby bumpers lining the cribs, and now there's nothing really. You kind of put your baby in a onesie basically to sleep in, or a full, the footed onesies to sleep in to keep warm. But ECFE really provides that latest and greatest type information on being a parent that that you can trust from a trusted messenger almost, correct?
Yes. And then being able to just have awareness about, there's greater cultures and family cultures. And so being able to provide research-based information and the meet families where they're at, what is this best fit for your family and how can we do this safely, right?
Yeah, because I think everyone really wants to make sure they're doing their best. I think the majority of us all want to do our best. So, we have questions that we always kind of ask people, and 80% of a child's brain architecture develops in the first 3 years of their life. And I just wanted to know your opinion on what can parents do to maximize their child's brain development.
Yeah, so engaging. I know that Little Moments Counts talks about those big 3 things of talking, singing, reading, And then, of course, playing. All of that is embedded through play with our young children. I feel as though it's always really helpful for me as an educator to always go back to what are our children's jobs. So an infant's job is to attach. A toddler's job is to explore, and oftentimes exploration, right, can look like chaos in whatever space we're in. Maybe it's our home, maybe it's at the grocery store, maybe just wherever you are. A toddler's job is to explore, and exploring often looks pretty chaotic. I like to give that friendly reminder. And then a preschooler's job is to play.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, I think a lot of us think we need to go out and spend like a lot of money on the most latest and greatest things to help them explore with their brain development and spend hundreds of dollars on all these little gadgets and things like that. But in truth, it's really not that serious. You can literally just do things around the house to enhance that development, correct?
Definitely. And I think one of the beautiful things about living in the city is there's so much that is available to our families here. The parks are a wonderful place, especially now during the summertime, to be able to get out and engage together during our forever long winters. We have some fabulous libraries, and they have wonderful, not only our books, fabulous selection of books, but also toys and manipulatives for families to be able to utilize and engage in together.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So if you're able to really make sure you can maximize that brain development by the reading, the talking, the singing, the playing, what are the likely benefits for your child as they enter into kindergarten?
Yeah, so moving into kindergarten, we want our kiddos to be able to have had several those constant interactions, right? Those positive interactions with a trusted caregiver, because those help strengthen those pathways between the neurons in their brain. So then by the time our kiddos are entering kindergarten, they've had that foundation built so that they are ready for all of those pre-literacy, pre-math, pre-science concepts. They're essentially ready to take on that learning. Given that, again, all of those continued interactions with a trusted grown-up are happening previously.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as they even go into kindergarten and, get away from that first 1,000 days, there's also education and health benefits as well. Can you tell us what you know about that?
Yes.
Those time benefits of this.
Yeah. So lifelong learning, right? So again, if we are continuously engaging with our children during those first 3 years of life, because again, so much of their brain is being formed during those first 3 years, essentially our children are going to be able to continue to grow up and continue to be able to engage in relationships with other people, right? Because essentially all of our learning and all of our continued lifespan is going to be in relationship with others. Again, sometimes it's chosen relationships, sometimes it's not, but essentially our kiddos being able to have those social emotional skills and being able to all of those executive functions, right? So them being able to self-regulate, them being able to co-regulate, those starts of those things are being built within those first 3 years. So them being able to have an awareness of their body, being able to acknowledge how their body is feeling in spaces and places with their trusted caregiver, with new trusted caregivers, is going to be able to then set them on this pathway, because we've all been there, right? We've been in relationships with adults where we're like, oh my goodness, we're needing to do some pre-teaching, some emotion coaching here. But what if we did it sooner, right? What if we did it sooner?
That is such a great point, Bethany. Because even as an adult, emotions are so hard to navigate, especially those big emotions like anger and feeling like the abandonment, our confusion, our even feeling neglect, those are big emotions and hard emotions as an adult to even navigate. And having, even just personally as an adult that really didn't learn how to deal with a lot of those tougher emotions in a healthy way, growing up, I'm having to learn it now. And I do wonder about, how it could have been better for even folks like me, who I feel like I'm doing okay. I'm like, I've never been in jail or anything like that, not to say that, but you know what I mean? Like, I've never had like these big punishments or parochial type things happen to me for my emotions. However, it's still a struggle. It's hard to know how to deal when bad things happen. And to have that foundation as a child, I feel like would really benefit us more as you grow, for sure. That really resonates with me. I love that.
Definitely. And if we, again, I think a lot of things are always changing, right? All of the information we're getting about early childhood development, thank goodness, is evolving, and we're all learning and growing. And I really think within just the past 5 or 7 years, there's been so much more of an intentionality on emotion coaching in parenting. And therefore, a lot of us, I think, grew up, again, in families where our caregivers loved us unconditionally, but just didn't know that there was this window of time where so much of our brain development is happening. Mm-hmm. And if they had the tools to be able to do some emotion coaching, to be able to hold space for all emotions, a lot of caregivers in classes talk about how my adults were able to talk about emotions that were positive, right? So I felt happy, I felt excited, I maybe felt proud. Those things were able to be recognized and held space for. There was a lot of uncomfortability around emotions that were maybe more challenging, such as anger, frustration, embarrassment, anxiousness, nervousness. So again, if we're able to hold space and talk our children through those feelings, wow, what adults we could be now in our adult relationships.
That learning that effective communication that you will always need, always need. So I know that you're an early childhood educator. I don't know if I asked you this, but could you tell me what led you to choose a career like this in early childhood education and parent education?
Yeah, again, I feel as though I almost stumbled upon it, but it made so much sense. And you get the best of both worlds, right? I love the age of early childhood, that 0 to 5, 0 to age 8, truly. Children they're so open at these ages. They're really honest. You don't have to guess. We're not at that window of time where there's not this passive aggressiveness of, what are you mad about right now? They're just really honest and upfront about it. And
teenagers are so challenging, Bethany, so challenging.
And they're really, they're not that embarrassment about maybe possibly showing love and affection hasn't come yet, right? Like they fully love you, and it's just a wonderful thing. And then being able to connect with their grownups is such a special thing as well, because again, you're getting who knows them better? Nobody than their most trusted grownup. So it's just a really wonderful thing.
It is. And I'm glad you brought up grownups, because I want to know, like, how do you support the grownups of the young learners in your role?
Yeah, so specifically in my role in ECFE, I primarily teach our classes. So grownups are coming to school with their kids. So we're spending all of the time together. And so therefore, we are talking about all of that research-based information. We're talking about family culture, about their greater cultures and communities that they are surrounded by and are part of that support system for families, and then being able to nurture both them and their children in their learning. Another part of ECFE is doing things such as home visits, and home visits can look a variety of ways, but that's a really great time to be able to interact with families one-on-one and provide those supports. And I also typically go into some of our elementary schools to support classrooms there, and being the parent educator in, again, helping those kiddos, grown-ups navigate. Our school system is really confusing for families. And so just being able to provide those external supports of how can we help you in home life? Because again, if we help families in home life, it's only going to benefit those kiddos in school life.
Mm-hmm. And and school's confusing, even as someone who is like born in, St. Paul, and speaks English as my first and only language. Actually, like if you are from a different country or first immigrant families, or you're non-speaking of English as your first language or don't speak English at all, the system is very, very confusing. And kind of just more interested too in like how ECFE supports families like that as well.
Yes. So we have a handful of parent educators that go into our elementary school systems. And just like what you said, yep, it's confusing for most of us. And then the additional things, right? Possibly, yes, being an immigrant to the country, possibly not having English as your first language. There are a lot of things that add to that. So our parent educators and early childhood teachers help support families with basic school choice, learning how that registration request process works, being able to communicate with your children's classroom teacher. So things like open houses and teacher grown-up conferences. And then learning about advocacy, right? Advocacy for our children throughout the school system, and really wanting to support families and it's a both and, right? It's a both and. We can support primary caregivers in being able to advocate for their children in the school system, in their classrooms, and be able to work with their kiddos' teacher. Like we're all on the same team, right? We all want our children to succeed.
Yep. You know, I'm even just kind of thinking about like what strategies do you use just to like help parents, make sure that they are doing that advocacy and, the other development helpful type things that you can do as a parent to support your learner in school.
Yeah, so we have what we call caregiver workshops. So sometimes those are hosted at the schools with the classroom teachers. So they could be on a variety of topics. They might be on topics such as things like emotion coaching or brain development. They might also be on very specific school-related things about school requests for the following school year. A lot of family, and how would you know, right? But a lot of school districts, specifically in Minneapolis public schools, our school request process starts in February of the year before. So we're going to start getting families. We're going to start talking to families about thinking about school requests in January when we come back from winter break. But a lot of people, how would you know, especially if it's your first kiddo, to be thinking about all these things for next school year, the winter before. So things like that, to be able to, again, just provide families tools. So we do that in the schools. We sometimes do things like this, such as a Zoom online. And then we do a lot of phone calls or going out into community spaces where families are gathering, possibly at various childcare centers, various community organizations, and being able to connect with caregivers that way as well.
Yeah. So how does a family even get involved in ECFE? Like, how do you sign up? How do you get to you?
Oh, we have families sign up. You could come in person to one of our schools. I teach predominantly at Mona Modi, which is a very small baby school in North Minneapolis in the Jordan neighborhood. We rep hard for North Side. They can call our office at Minneapolis Public Schools ECFE. They could sign up online. We also have a placement center at our Minneapolis Public Schools Davis Center off of West Broadway in North Minneapolis, where families could register as well.
Nice. I know that your specialty, like you do, like talking to children more, well, not like, but you're very engaged when you're talking about race and things like that. And I do want to get into that just like in the other half here. But one thing I do want to say is I do have a lot of friends who, thank goodness, were involved in early childhood education, that were able to see that their child was neurodivergent and or maybe even just needed support that way. The highly trained eyes of staff were able to say, hey, I kind of noticed your learner is, not hitting certain benchmarks. I just noticed certain things. Maybe we should get them assessed or here's some support, if you could just maybe just tell me about your experience around that too. Because it happens a lot,
Definitely. And again, just to speak back to, you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, how would you know that school request time is in February if this is your first kiddo? How would you know that, like, the behaviors that your child is expressing, or maybe lack thereof, are possibly due to being neurodivergent? Like, how would you know? So yes, definitely. In our classrooms, in our programming, we talk to all families about early childhood screening. And so we want to, which is going to you could actually do early childhood screening in any district before 3, or doing it at 3. We want to screen at 3. And but really, early childhood screening is one of those tools that we use to ensure that families and their kiddos are on that pathway that they need to be ready for kinder. And it is able to kind of catch those things that, like, hey, I've noticed that, your kiddo is 3 and they aren't using 2-word phrases. It looks like they have maybe 5 to 10 words. Like, I'm just wondering if you're noticing that at home, and being able to start that conversation. And again, if your family is already coming to a class, chances are you already have a relationship with that teacher. And again, sometimes it's easier to be able to connect and hear those things that possibly could be a sensitive subject matter from a trusted person like a teacher.
It can definitely be very scary. And, sometimes parents do become defensive because it is hard to hear things like that about your child, because we always have these greatest hopes and expectations. But a lot of those things also, if they're caught early enough, your child can be on track through the rest of their learning career. It's always like the earlier you find out, the better, because then they have the tools to make sure that they can stay on track with the rest of their peers too. But if they can't, at least they'll get there eventually at their own time too sometimes. So no, I love that. You're listening to The Narrative here on KRSM Radio. I'm speaking to Bethany Gilmer, early childhood educator, with Minneapolis Public Schools. I wanted to talk to you more, Bethany, coming in about just like things with race. We've had really big years of a racial reckoning in our town here in Minneapolis. Well, it's not a town, it's a city. And, one of your passions actually is engaging young children in conversations and learning about race. And I just wanted to know, why do you think that this is important, and how do you approach this topic with young children and also their parents?
Yeah, I think this topic is so important because race impacts all of us on a daily basis. And I would say similarly to emotion coaching, or lack thereof, that many of us got, it's even less, right? I feel like often than not, there's a lot of parallels between learning about race and learning about sex ed. And more often than not, it's that we've gotten no language, no supports, no understanding from our most trusted grownups most often in these early years. And really up until adulthood, a lot of people are doing their own learning about both race and sex ed. So again, it's impactful in everybody's lives. And what if all of us had conversations? And again, it's not, and I think oftentimes our adult mind goes to like those really intense moments, talking about race, and very like extreme and hard and hurtful. And again, those are conversations as well. But really, it really starts with such basics of observations, right? Our kiddos are all the time, and we as their adults are commenting on observations in our daily life all the time. But it's really interesting to hear the lack thereof of very intentional commenting on observations about specifically race.
So it's not like you're saying we're going to teach them about the Selma riots or something like that in ECFE. It can more or less be like, oh, my skin's darker brown, your skin's lighter brown, or your skin is like white or like peachy colored. It could be simple things like that. Is that what you mean by that? Or
Definitely. Yes, because wow, that'd be, holy cow, we'd be sitting here like, whoo, how are you going to explain the Selma riots? Yeah, but 100%, It's our basic observations of each other. And I always like to let everyone know kiddos are constantly observing and commenting on their observations. And when they are commenting on race, more often than not, they just want to know what it means. What does it mean that Miss Bethany has dark brown skin? What does that mean? It means I got melanin, honey. I got melanin, and my melanin is super busy. And maybe your skin has melanin that's just as busy as mine. Maybe it's busier than mine. So if it's busier than mine, that means it's probably going to be darker. If it's not as busy as mine, it's going to be lighter, right? But they're making observations and they want to know if it means anything.
And one thing I have kind of noticed as well is my white friends don't really talk to their kids about race that much. It's like, oh, everyone's the same, don't see any color. And it is changing now, I feel like, since 2020 and 2021. However, it's just something I kind of noticed. I feel like as Black parents, my Black friends seem like we talk about race a little bit more, so the kids kind of know already, but a lot of my white friends, it's just different. I don't know, maybe it's just, I don't know why, maybe it's just the lived experience, but how have you encountered things like that as well, or what have you noticed?
Yeah, definitely. And you know what, definitely, I would say yes. White families raising white kiddos. It seems to be, if we're kind of on the spectrum of over here, we talk about it every day, all the time, or we talk about it maybe never at all. Like it's closer to, the never at all to like sometimes in between that range. Again, I would agree with you that I think, recent events within the past, I would say maybe since even 2016 moving up, things have started to progressively change, which great. Mm-hmm. And then I would definitely say more for families of color. I would say very specifically African-American Black families. I have noticed definitely have more intentional conversations. But again, that's not to say we are not going to have any white people going and asking possibly their Black friends, like, how do you engage in conversations with your kiddos about race? Because that would be an assumption, right? That all Black families are doing this on the constant and have all the language and feel the comfortability. Like, we don't need to assume anything. So, yeah.
Facts. So I'm just kind of wondering, what challenges have you encountered, I guess, when discussing race with young children, and how have you overcome them?
I think I've had this question a lot by families, and I think a lot of teachers and caregivers are often wanting to know that, right? Like, that's like, what is the challenge around kids? And my answer always is it's not the kids. It's not the kids. It's me. It's us. It's the adults, right? It's us. Like, we're the problem, but it's us getting stuck in our adult brain of more oftentimes we use our adult brain and all of the adult messages we've picked up and perceived by the thing our kiddo is saying. And really, again, if we go back to the really simple basics, your kiddo has probably just made a statement or asked a question about an observation they had. And they, again, are wanting to know from you, their most trusted caregiver, what does it mean? Does it mean anything? Right? And so oftentimes it's us, it's the adults and our discomfort. And maybe even it's not discomfort. Maybe it's you're sitting there. I'm like, I just don't know. And that's okay. That's so okay. And so then I just want us to lean into letting our children know. What a humbling moment. Gosh, if I had more adults in my life when I was a kiddo, just being able to say that, I think it's really it's easy to do that, right? Kiddos put us adults on pedestals, but being able to humanize us a bit more and adults don't know everything. They are also learning and growing, right? So it's a really great moment to be like, wow, that's such a great question. I have that wondering too now. You know what? When I know, I'm going to let you know. I'm going to have to get back to you about that kind of a thing.
So basically, the adults are the drama.
Yeah.
Not surprised by your answer to that, because it does make sense, having a family that is multicultural. Myself, I noticed that, it's a lot of the adults that put our biases, our fears on children sometimes when it comes to things like that, for sure. So, because in your experience, it just seems like the children are able to respond positively then to these discussions about race.
Yeah. And again, they're just kids are wanting us to engage, right? They're wanting us to engage. So they might say something like, for example, if I have a family come in the first day of school and they're like, hey, your skin's really brown. Or if, I didn't see them since the end of the school year, my skin has darkened up a lot since the summers got here. Miss Bethany, why your skin look so brown? Why you look so different right now? And that's the first thing out of their mouth in the door. A lot of the adults possibly might feel embarrassed. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. They didn't mean to, and all the things. It's all good. It's all good. We can talk about that right now. You're right. You're right. My skin is darker. Look at this. Ooh, I love the skin I'm in. Do you love the skin you're in? When we're in the sun, our melanin gets busier. Everybody's skin gets darker in the sun. That's something so cool. That's the same about us, even though we have different colors of skin. But again, yes, kiddos are more often than not just wanting us to acknowledge what they're saying, wondering if it means anything. And then they are so ready to move on. The next minute, they're like, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Do you have any food here? Right? Honest to goodness, how many of us have been like that? Our kiddo asks us this really intense, what we feel as an adult is a really intense question. What happens to my body when I die? 5 minutes later, do you have any Cheetos? And so us, again, being able to just really address what it is in that moment they're saying to us or asking of us. And then they're ready to move on. Mm-hmm. Done and done.
Yeah, I feel like I used to work in a kindergarten classroom a little bit, and they would always want to touch my hair. And it was curiosity. But I did use it as a touch, as a moment to say, you know what, you can touch my hair, but anyone else, you need to ask first. And sometimes people don't like when you ask. So make sure you know that person, and I would just use it as a teaching moment. And I would allow them to, because they want to explore. And I feel like I was in the room as a role as an educator. So if they can kind of find out more about my culture and me and how I express myself creatively, and as one of the things I like to do that is through my hair, I would allow them to, because I knew those children. I know, but I would definitely want to let them know sometimes people don't like that. And you probably want to make sure you know that person before you ask them that. Don't go up to strangers asking them that. But there are ways, I say all that to say is there's just ways I feel like each adult, as you interact in this world, this beautiful world that is full of so many different kinds of people with so many different kinds of beautiful opinions and ways of living and cultures, we can really make sure we're gentle with our young people to harbor that curiosity, keep them curious and keep them kind and keep them and work with them with grace, I think, is what I'm really kind of receiving from this conversation with you. And also just remove that fear, that adult fear. I don't need to go high level. It can be very low level conversations, especially with that 0 to 5 year old piece of students, our learners. So, yeah.
Yes, definitely. And just even to comment on your example. So again, then being able to, so I feel everything can be tied back right to emotion coaching as well. So being able to have that conversation then with our kiddos. And so I heard consent in there too. Oh, you're about to touch somebody else's body. What are things we need to do first? Yeah. And then considering, do we have a relationship with this person? Kind of a thing as well. But then also being able to have that conversation with our kiddos kind of later on of do you often, we can do a thumbs up or a thumbs, I do oftentimes when I'm working with kids, thumbs up, yes, thumbs down, no. But I'm thumbs up or thumbs down if you often have people asking to touch your hair. Some of our kiddos have had that a lot. Some of our kiddos have had that not at all. But and then we can talk about how would that feel? How would that feel if a lot of spaces and places you went, people are constantly either touching your hair, maybe they don't even ask. How does that feel? And then maybe even if they do ask, if people are always asking to touch your hair, would you like that? How does that feel? Kind of a thing. But we're able to then, it's that empathy building, right? So as our kiddos get older in life, they're able to acknowledge wow, Miss Bethany, you've constantly had people commenting on your skin, or you've constantly had people, asking to touch your hair. But that doesn't always feel great. Again, so being able to start to build that empathy.
I love that. You're kind of going into my next question of how can early childhood educators create a safe and inclusive environment where all children feel respected and valued, regardless of the race or background?
Yeah. I really strongly believe that our goal as teachers in classrooms is to be able for all families, all kiddos to be able to be recognized, right? All of the identities, we all hold multiple identities. And for those identities to be able to be recognized in our classroom and really celebrated and empowered, right? So it is so impactful. Gosh, I think, and I think my goal always with teaching is to be the teacher that I wish I had had as a kiddo, because wow, if I had had a preschool teacher that looked like me. I never had a teacher of color. I always had white teachers growing up. So there's power in that, right? For all of my Black and brown kiddos to be able to see a teacher who looks like them is huge. And then if on top of that, and even if my white teachers, if my white teachers, when I was in preschool, if we had talked about the colors of our skin, right? Like we're all seeing it. We're talking about the colors of our skin. We're talking about the textures of our hair and all these other things that we lump into this topic of race. But if we had talked about that and my teacher had told me that, Bethany, your skin is so beautiful, Kyle, your skin is so, like if we had had that affirmation early on, wow, being able to again enter into this world, being able to go through as adults, and then I'm able to reject other messages that I will receive later on in life, right? Like we want all children to be able to have accurate information from their most trusted grownups, because then if we're doing that early on, they're going to be able to naturally reject inaccurate information. When they hear those inaccurate messages, they're going to be able to automatically be, that's not true. That's not true. And they can tell somebody else, right?
Yeah. Such important work. Wow. You're taking me back to just even when I had my first Black teacher, I was her shadow. I followed her around and, I was in elementary school and it was third grade and I still remember her name and she looked like Coretta Scott King to me. She was just so beautiful. And I just remember, do you want me to pass out the papers for you? And just like really wanting to make sure, I don't know, I just wanted to be next to her. I could not get enough. And yeah, it is good to see people who look like you. And absolutely, like I would never want to disappoint that. Yeah, I never wanted to disappoint that teacher. Like I don't know, she's still in my heart because she had so much love and care and was such a great role model. What a fantastic job to be a teacher. You guys don't get paid enough. Hands down. I kind of want to know, a little bit about what resources or materials do you find helpful in teaching young children about race and promoting inclusivity?
Yeah, I am so again, practice, right? Like the more we practice, the more comfortable it gets. So I want to definitely own and put out there that where I'm at now is such a different space and place than when I started teaching, right? Like my comfortability level in talking to kiddos about race and talking to grownups about race has grown so much. But again, it's been the intentionality of practice. So I always want to encourage all caregivers that no matter where you are, no matter where your comfortability level is, the more you practice, it's going to grow. It's going to grow. And so for families, adults that are feeling really discomfort, let's say you're over here and you're like, I talk about race in everyday interactions every single day. Fabulous. Continue learning, continue growing. Obviously, we're always going to be learning and growing. For families that maybe are over here, like, I've never done this. I've never once named race. I don't even think in an adult relationship. I have no idea how to do it, with my newborn baby or my 4-year-old. Feel the most uncomfortable right now. I always recommend books. There are so many fabulous children's books out there right now that literally they're going to do it all for you. So I'm just like, you go ahead, you read this book together. And maybe the first handful of times you read the book, that's it. That's where your comfort level is at. Like, we read the book. Okay, I'm ready to get a snack ready, kind of a thing. But again, the more you do it, like the more you can talk about the book, it's going to bring up its own conversations. And then you can start to engage in those with your kiddo. And oftentimes I have families that'll say like, my kiddo isn't talking yet, right? We're maybe in that 0 to 2 window of time where like language hasn't fully emerged. So I'm not going to start yet, but don't worry, after 2, I will. And I'm like, oh, you know what? Actually, this time when they're not talking back to you, this is the perfect time for you to work through your discomfort, right? So you go ahead, you word vomit, you work through that. And you're like, oh, you know what? I actually think I'm going to rephrase what I just said next time. So then you're doing it again, right? So then by the time that they are 2 and up and they are talking back with you, you've already built up your comfort level and you're thinking, oh, I'm ready for this. And yes, you are. Si se puede. You are.
It's also too like maybe just having books and things like that for sure that have multicultural, multi-ethnic people in it so they can see the pictures and things like that too. Kind of removing that black book, white book type stereotypes and just kind of thinking of giving the child like this beautiful rainbow diet, I guess, source of like of books and cultures and things like that too early on. May help with that as well, right? Or no? Are we just doing too much at that point?
I think, you know what? It's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
It is not enough for us to buy books and be that are, racially diverse, culturally diverse, possibly family structure diverse. It's not enough if you have just, gone out, filled your home with those books and they are just sitting there, but you're not having conversations about them in extension to reading the book, then we're just here. You really need to be explicitly having conversations. That's the biggest thing about race and sex ed is that not having the explicit conversation of, hey, let's notice all the colors of skin that are in this book. Let's notice all the different styles and textures of hair. I want you to go first. Can you go first? Can you point out all the different shades of skin that you notice here? And then I'll take a turn. And then we can talk about, what do you think it means? What do you think this means that this person has white skin here? Does it mean anything to you? We can have those explicit conversations because not having those explicit conversations with our kiddos sends the message to them that it's something that it's talking about race is bad and it's not safe. And that's not true, right? It's not true. So again, I would recommend that families really go out and search for books that the book is explicitly having the conversation for you. And there are a new fabulous book series called First Conversations. And the first one in the series that they came out with is called Our Skin. And it explicitly is going to, again, have the conversation for you. So if you are feeling so discomfort in naming race, it's going to do it for you. It's going to talk about melanin. It's going to talk about how we all have it. And some people's is busy and some people's isn't. And there's a range in between kind of a thing. But it's so important to very intentionally be having the conversation paired with whatever tool you're using to support you.
I love that. Thank you for that, because it is the intentionality. And also, if you don't have the words, there are the books that give you the words to help bridge that conversation with your child. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. If you're just tuning in, we're talking to Bethany Gilmer, early childhood educator, talking about early childhood brain development and also race, like just how to talk to your child about race, how you can support your 0 to 5-year-old child on these types of conversations. So Bethany, we're getting towards the end here of our discussion. Just thank you so much for the knowledge and just the care that you're bringing to our listeners right now. I'm just wondering if there are any specific stories or memorable moments you'd like to share from your work with young children and families.
Oh, gosh. I think the power of, I guess now I'm thinking about like talking and engaging with families about race. So again, the power we have as educators to be able to empower young children and feeling good about the skin they're in. Again, what that would have meant to me as a young child moving up into life. And then all children being able to reject untrue messages. So again, very specifically, Beverly Daniels Tatum, who has done a lot of research and work. She's the author of that book, Why All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria. But she talks about how, again, for us, a reminder for us as adults that it's not a bad thing to name race. It's not a bad thing to name race. What we need to be recognizing in with naming race, are you adding value? Are you devaluing somebody? And that's the skill set, the tools that we want our children to be able to critically think with. And so again, for all children, so if I have a white kiddo and they are seeing a message or hearing a message out in spaces and places that they're better, right? That they are superior because of their whiteness, that they're automatically able to be like, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. Like my whiteness doesn't make me any better than any other person, right? And for all of my Black and Brown and Native kids, for them, if they are seeing a message out in spaces and places that they are less than because of the color of their skin, that they then are also able to say, that's not true. That's not true. That is an untrue message about people that have this color of skin, kind of a thing.
Yeah. How do you stay updated with all this, the research and the best practices in early childhood education and parent education? Like, how do you keep up with all of it? It seems like it's always changing.
Always changing. We're always learning, always growing. So again, letting our kids know that we as adults are continuously learning and growing. It's great. It is. And it can be overwhelming, right? Both and. But yeah, our school system does a fabulous job of providing professional development throughout our school year in which our teachers we're learning together collectively, which is really helpful then, right? Helpful to be able to learn with your peers and be able to, because again, all of our teaching classes and opportunities throughout our job look so different. And so then being able to collaborate on that. So we have professional development throughout the year. There are so many great resources here within the metro area. At the University of Minnesota, they have the Center for Early Childhood Development. We have, again, Minneapolis and St. Paul are places and spaces where a lot of conferences come. So we've had things like the National Adoption and Permanency program come here and give information to educators and providers about family structures that might not be birth families. A lot of our information for caregiving is based in this lens that all families are birth families, and that's not true for all families, right? And then things, again, the beautiful internet that can feel really overwhelming, but has so many fabulous resources, such as things like 0 to 3 and Embrace Race, or Our First Conversations. The book provides a lot of information that's really helpful for families that are entering into that space of learning of how to engage in conversation with young kiddos about race.
Wow. Love it, love it, love it. I guess, and I just want to know too, is there anything that you would like to see change in the field too? Like, what changes and improvements do you think early childhood education can do to just better support children and their families too?
Yeah, I think that the continued intentionality of us always learning collectively about, anti-racism, anti-bias work within our practice. Again, just really acknowledging the power and influence that we have with families. And therefore, it's our responsibility to always continue to be learning and growing in those ways, and reflecting if the strategies, the curriculum, our approaches to engaging with families are the most effective. Are they most culturally relevant? Are they anti-racist?
Yeah. And that anti-racist right now, CRT, anti-racist, we're seeing a lot of laws combating that, books being banned even. What a scary time in a way to be an educator, because if you are about that diversity, equity, and inclusion work, it feels like you could be under attack and really put, a lot at risk. But it seems like the research really does show that it helps to make us better people as a society, to really just acknowledge those changes and acknowledge those harms, and that empathy piece is so big. I think maybe we would have been a little bit better with you and our to teach some of the people.
Definitely.
They needed you, Bethany. Where were you?
We all needed each other. We needed each other.
We do. Is there anything though, just like in closing, that you would like to add, or any message you would like to share with our listeners regarding early childhood education and just supporting our young learners?
I think, again, it's just always helpful for us to remember, I think, key things that what are our children's jobs? So infant's job is to attach, a toddler's job is to explore, preschooler's job is to play. The limit does not exist, right? The limit does not exist on the number of adults that can care and love and support our children. The limit does not exist for that. And again, when you si se puede, you can do it in those little moments daily. There are so many opportunities, if you really think about it, to start those conversations about race. And it's okay. You're going to stumble. All of us stumble. All of us make mistakes. That's okay. The worst mistake to make should just be to have it stop you, to have it prevent you from trying again. So I want to encourage you, si se puede, you can do it. And oftentimes our children are so forgiving, right? They're like, oh yeah, I made a mistake too. It's all good. So si se puede, you got it.
Oh, thank you so much, Bethany. I really appreciate you. You've been listening to Bethany Gilmer, early childhood educator. Thank you so much for coming on The Narrative. This has been just a really invigorating conversation. I have some new parents in my life, and I'm really going to encourage them to put their child into the ECFE, just because it is such a great resource that we have here. We're lucky to have it. So again, just thank you for coming on and all that you do for our community and our young people. Wow, thank you. So you can hear a recording of this show at littlemomentscount.org/podcast. And if you'd like to learn more about Little Moments Count, you can visit their website at littlemomentscount.org. Thank you for tuning into The Narrative, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening to the Little Moments Count radio podcast in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. You can find the Little Moments Count radio podcast wherever you get your podcasts and at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.